Why do you get to clap? I always intro it. Do you want to intro
it? I forget what you say.
Hey guys, back to another episode of the podcast, Average Eskate Reviews podcast. And in this episode, since Ricky couldn't muster up the courage to drop the title, we're going to be looking at Flexi decks versus stiff decks.
Flexi versus stiff.
So you kick it off, man.
All right, so Flexi versus stiff decks. What are the differences between the two, and why would you necessarily go for one over the other? Because when we was purchasing our boards, I went purely based on the look of the board. So the carbon just looks way nicer to me than the bamboo, but obviously that was a stiff deck and the bamboo's a flexi deck. Whereas Chris, you went for the bamboo based on previous experience with the stealth and how flexi that deck was.
Yeah,
so
for sure. It was, I didn't really think about the differences in the way the boards rode or what my actual requirements and needs were. It was, I'm used to a flexi deck, so why would I use anything other than a flexi deck?
Yeah, and I suppose me being the first board that I sort of necessarily rode a lot was the X-Way, and that had a stiff deck. So maybe that just sort of swayed my preference over to the carbon more than the bamboo. But the interesting thing is now, lately we've been riding, swapping over boards. The carbon you've had to go on, I've been having to go on the bamboo, and you've realised, I'm like, damn, that bamboo is nice now to ride on.
Exactly.
And you've enjoyed the carbon as well, so
much so I had to go get one.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's when you're sort of buying a board, I know you might gravitate more towards one over the other, but that's not necessarily going to be the best option for you. So I suppose in this episode, we're going to sort of like just have a little talk about and chat about the differences that we've found out between using each other's boards. And so this can give you a little bit of insight to when purchasing the board yourself, what you might actually want to go for and what's going to suit your needs the best. So when it comes to sort of like purchasing a board over a flexi deck, over a stiff deck, what would your sort of recommendations be, and what things would you need to sort of take into consideration and look out for?
I think for sure the first one is definitely going to be your build. If you're a rider that is heavy, the first thing you need to consider with that is, depending on how heavy you are, boards like the Evolve GTR Bamboo are incredibly flexible, and they don't have very much ground clearance in terms of the battery being off of the ground. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're very heavy and the board flexes even the slightest amount, the battery is going to come into contact with the ground. So straight away, that's going to be that board eliminated. It's the same thing with the boosted board as well, or any boards that like the X-Way Flex, same as that. Heavier riders need to go for decks that can support their weight. So that's definitely the first thing that I would consider looking at. But based off of my own experience, me not being a particularly heavy person, I do notice, and I am concerned when I'm going over, especially speed bumps, like hard speed bumps made of like gravel or concrete or whatever. What is it? Tarmac or asphalt. Yeah. Where you're watching from in the world. Yeah, so those types of speed bumps, I'm cautious when I go over them because I know the battery's going to hit the ground.
Yeah. But there's also obviously to take into consideration as well is, are you going to be riding mainly street, or are you going to be going off-road every now and again? Because if you're going off-road and you've got that flexi bamboo deck, then that's not going to be very good for going over bumps and lumps and things like that. I've seen a lot of people that are going on them pump tracks as well. So it's definitely, if you're a heavy rider, that's definitely not going to be the board that you're going to want to choose.
So from there, what would you say is the next element that people need to consider when you're trying to decide if you want a flexi deck or a stiff deck?
Okay, so I'll probably say the next thing that you want to be taking a look at is the way the board actually rides, the way that it feels, because using the carbon, which I was primarily using, you feel every bump, every lump that you go over on the road. Even when you've got the 6 inches on or the 7 inches on, you're still going to feel more vibrations than you would if you was using a flexi deck. And it also slightly reacts different as well. The way that you sort of go over a bump, you sort of get a little bit of a kickback afterwards with the flexi deck, but sometimes going over certain bumps, you can just glide straight over them. So there's a little bit of an adjustment period that you need to take into consideration there, because you will get a slightly different ride, a slightly different feel with the bamboo over the carbon, whereas the carbon's just a stiff, flat deck. You hit a bump, you know you've hit that bump. There's no sort of reaction time afterwards to take into account for. So I think when it comes to sort of the bamboo versus the carbon and the way they feel and ride, is the flexi deck is going to give you a really nice smooth ride. You're going to feel less vibrations,
less bumps
going over the road. But when it comes to the carbon deck, you do feel more stable, more planted on that deck. There's not that reaction period that you have to take into account for.
I think what you're saying is essentially the carbon deck is very predictable.
The carbon deck's very predictable. So if if you hit something, brace for that bump. Whereas you might go over something with the bamboo or a flexi deck, and
it's a little bit more
that bump, and then you sort of get the bump hit a little bit after you've actually gone over the bump.
Yeah.
So
the boards, it's because it's
the
flexing and
taking the vibration and
exactly,
yeah.
So the whole deck, even if you see clips of me riding off of curbs, like at an angle rather than riding off of them straight off of them, you can see the whole board twisting and contorting as I'm hitting the ground, and that is definitely a sensation that requires a bit of adjusting to be able to get used to, because you could say I don't want to refer to a very flexible deck as unpredictable, because once you've been riding it for a bit, you know how it reacts.
Yeah, it's just if you've gone from a stiff deck coming over to a flexi deck, then these are the things that you need to sort of take into consideration, because the board's not going to react the same way as that stiff deck did. So,
but it's a massive difference. Yeah, it's a massive difference. Massive difference. I'm very used to riding flexible decks, and I'm used to, especially boards like the Boosted board, super flexible deck.
Yeah.
The bamboo, not as flexible as the Boosted deck, but still very flexible, and you get very used to the strange delay, you could say, with the way that the board reacts to different bumps and different vibrations. It definitely helps to absorb vibrations better, but when you go over curbs and bumps,
and then obviously, like, you've got to take into consideration the ride of it is smoother. It's more of a cruiser, Whereas the carbon board, you wouldn't want to just sort of sit there for a long period of time, just cruising. It's not really like a cruising board. I don't think. The bamboo's just like so smooth, just at them lower speeds, just cruising on. It's just really a nice ride. Whereas the bamboo, you're going to still feel a lot of vibrations, even at lower speeds. But, the boards do feel completely different. And this is the whole point of this podcast, is to try and get you to understand or show you the different ways that the boards react. And if you're looking for a board, whether it's got a flexi deck or a stiff deck, then it's going to help you sort of be able to think, oh, these are points that, I never even thought of when I was purchasing a board. I just went because, I liked that deck, or I liked the specs of that board.
For sure.
So, hopefully this sheds a bit of insight into the differences between flexi and stiff. But yeah.
I think something else that's also worth mentioning is the different shapes as well, because the bamboo is particularly great at carving, just based on the shape of the deck as well. Yeah. The carbon deck, on the other hand, tends to be much better for if you just want to absolutely fly down streets. It has those grooves for your feet to be able to sit into, almost like pockets for your feet to be able to sit into for a little bit of extra grip, and without looking down at the board, you know where the end of the board is, which is always great.
That's it.
That deck also is a little bit longer than the bamboo, which helps. But that's another one that I've noticed in general. When you look at even decks like the Eksate X1, the shape of that deck, the way that deck feels versus the Eksate Flex, just based off of the way they are visually, you can see that there's a big difference in the shapes.
Yeah.
And that also affects the kind of feel that you get, and I guess you could say, the type of rider that board is suited for.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously every manufacturer's boards are slightly different, and their decks are going to be slightly different. So when it comes to sort of the flexi decks, like the Boosted Stealth there, I mean, there's not really any indentations or anything like that, or grooves for your feet to sit in. It's a curved deck, but quite a very flat deck at the same time. Whereas like the bamboo on the Evolve, it's got little grooves so that your feet feel planted and sit in there, and you can really push that board out and carve with it. Whereas like the stiff deck carbon, that has got grooves at either end, so when you're flooring it, you can push back and lean forwards on, but then it's not a necessarily indentation there or curved in so that you can carve as much with it. And the same was like the Eksate board, that's quite a flat, stiff deck as well. So there's loads of different variations of different boards, and all their decks are going to be slightly different. So I'd just bear that in mind if you're trying to figure out what you want.
Any other elements that you think are worth mentioning about the differences between those two decks? What about general maintenance as well?
So yeah, general maintenance, that's definitely a good one, because obviously cleaning the bamboo or the Eksate, they're all enclosed, they're all sealed enclosures, so you can easily wipe them off. There's less maintenance there, it's easier to clean. Whereas like the bamboo, because of the flexi deck and the battery compartment that's needed on those for flexing with, if you're going to clean it, you've got to try and get into all of those little grooves and indentations, and it just takes a lot longer. Yeah,
for sure. I think it's the same with all of the stiff decks versus flexi deck boards that we've experienced, because essentially the flexible deck boards tend to have the batteries just attached to the base of them, whereas the stiff deck boards tend to have the batteries built into the enclosures, or like the Eksate, for example. There's also a lot of other boards that have sort of similar setups, like the N1 board. that was around for a while that had, again, battery sealed inside the deck. And that makes the whole maintenance job a lot easier. It always used to annoy me when we'd come back from a ride and it's been a little bit damp outside, and my GTR Bamboo is absolutely caked in dirt, and it takes me ages to go in through all of the grooves trying to get the board clean, and you would literally just get one rag, wipe the base of your board, and you were done. So that's definitely another one to consider. And also the life of the boards as well, because I know for a fact that a bamboo, maple, whatever the deck might be made from, is going to suffer and break down way quicker than a board that's made out of carbon fiber.
Yeah, carbon fiber or some sort of composite material. Obviously, like a bamboo deck being a bamboo deck, if you get caught out in the rain or anything like that, that's going to be sealed to a certain amount of degree. But at some point, it's going to get to a point where
it'll be chipping, cracking, breaking.
It can't take anymore. So, yeah, that's definitely another thing to take into consideration when buying a board is, are you going to be riding somewhere that's quite wet and damp, or are you going to be somewhere that's relatively dry?
And how long are you going to have the board for? If it's something that you intend, if it's going to be a board that you intend to have for as long as the board is going to be alive for, you're happy to, maintain it, service it, switch out motors if they should go wrong, then the consideration into the material that the deck is made from definitely plays a big part, because at the end of the day, maple, bamboo, whatever, is not going to last anywhere near as long as carbon fiber.
So what was your experience from going from a flexible deck to a stiff deck? What was the period? How did it feel swapping from different decks, in your personal opinion?
Good question. So I think the funny thing is, like you said at the start of the podcast, I was like, straight away, the bamboo is going to be the one for me. And then I think it's when we were filming the GTR Carbon versus GTR Bamboo, and I was riding your GTR Carbon in central London, and just, taking the board up to top speed and just flying down streets, carving, not really too deep, but still having fun, seeing how far I could push the board out, is when you realized how stable the deck was. Because it's so stable, it's so predictable. You know exactly how the deck is going to react in different situations because it's stiff. There's no play in the deck, so there's nothing to throw you off. But then the bamboo, I'm going to dare say that I think the bamboo is a little bit more of a dynamic ride, because it is, I'm not in a negative way, it is slightly unpredictable in the sense that you don't really know how the deck is going to twist and contort when you hit something, when you go over something. Not in a bad way, not in a way that you lose control. No, but it's just
an experience.
Yeah, it's just
you've got to take that into consideration once you're using the board
exactly.
for a certain amount of time. You'll learn the way that board feels
exactly.
And handles.
It definitely feels more dynamic, and you can definitely carve a lot deeper and a lot harder just based on the shape of the deck and how flexible it is. That the flex almost gives you a spring as you're coming out of a turn, which kind of like throws you back into the position that you would be. Again, not in a negative way. It's a really weird sensation, but it's a really nice one.
Yeah.
Two very different sensations, and it's weird, and it's hard to try and say which one is better over the other. It really depends, again, on I think, as we said, build is going to be the main one. But for me, if I put build aside, if I was riding on relatively smooth roads, very predictable roads, not many bumps, not many rough surfaces, regardless of what wheels I had, I would definitely go for the carbon if I just wanted to have fun. If I was going to be riding on a variety of different types of surfaces, especially when we're in London, going from different parks to nice smooth streets to cycle tracks, I would opt for the bamboo. I think on a day-to-day basis, my bamboo is going to be the one that I use the most. And the carbon is going to be the one that I take out when I personally know that I'm going to be riding on really good roads and I can really push the board to see exactly what I can get out of it.
Yeah, definitely.
But again, I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. It's literally just preference. And
yeah. We're not trying to say a stiff deck's better than a flexi deck or anything like that. It's just to give you guys an idea on how the different decks have felt, from Chris riding it to myself riding them. So that if you are looking to purchase a board, you can obviously see from our experience how we've felt about the boards and how riding them is completely different. So
what about yourself, going from carbon to bamboo?
Yeah, so for me, like I said at the start of the video, I basically went for the carbon purely on the way that it looked. I just love that carbon fibre look. The bamboo traditional look's not really my kind of thing. But after going and riding Chris's bamboo, oh my God, I've completely changed the way I feel about flexi decks. It was so smooth to just sort of ride over rough surfaces. And the deck's a little bit wider as well, but just having that spring, that little bit of spring there, that little bit of give, just when you're going over sort of just any type of terrain, is just really nice. It's way more comfortable. But I still love my carbon. I still love the carbon board. I really, really do. But yeah, that bamboo, every time I jump on it and have a go on it, I'm just, this feels so nice.
Let me ask the question. Here's the question. If you could go back to Wick in Hackney and you were just about to buy the carbon or the bamboo, knowing what you know now, what would you do?
Oh, that's such a hard one. Like, I mean, this video is not about Evolve boards. This video is not about Evolve boards. This is about just a stiff and a Flexi deck. We're just referencing the Evolve boards because they're the ones that we've ridden. If I could go back to Wicks now from when we purchased the boards, I mean, I think I'd still keep my carbon just because I don't know what it is. I just don't really like the bamboo look.
Yeah.
But in terms of the way that it feels when I'm riding it, I do really like that flex there.
So if Evolve made a board that
Evolve
looked like
make a board that's made or looks like carbon fibre but is flexy, then yeah, that'd be the one for me.
Perfect. But yeah, it's definitely worth mentioning that this isn't an Evolve GTR carbon versus bamboo video. Those are just, I think they're good examples because they are the same board, the same components, the same battery capacity, the same motors, just different decks. Yeah. And that has such a massive impact on the way that the boards feel and perform.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's as in how they perform for each individual rider, not how the boards perform, because range, top speed, all of that is the same with both of the boards. It's just how they do it because the different decks is completely different.
Yeah.
There's not really any other examples out there of one manufacturer that makes, you know, the exact same board in two different options at this kind of level that's worth comparing, in my opinion. It's always worth mentioning that so people don't freak out in the comment section. But yeah, like we said, we're referencing Eksate a lot because that's a manufacturer that we've had a lot of experience with. We're referencing Booster a lot because, again, that's another manufacturer we've had a lot of experience with. But yeah, hopefully this has been helpful for some of you out there trying to figure out which deck is the one to go for. If there's anything that you feel that we've missed out, drop it down below in the comment section. Let us know what your opinion on Flexi versus stiff is, why you'd pick one over the other. And let's see what some of you guys suggest to see if there's anything that we've missed out or anything else that we can add.
Yeah, again, I hope this video's helped you out in deciding what board that you want to go for. But yeah, once again, peace, guys.
Thanks for watching, guys, and take care to the next one. Peace.